David, thanks.
Why is it so hard for us to accept God's truth about us? Like, why have so many gone that way?
I talked to you about this in the first group, but it is because of the connection between our worth and truth. In other words, what we have inside of us is that we believe we're only worth something from God's perspective, or from a person who's sharing truth with us perspective. We're only worth something as long as we're doing the right thing, whatever the definition of the right thing is by that person. And we have this very strong connection between our worth and hearing the truth about ourselves. In other words, we think whenever we've heard the truth about ourselves that disagrees with our own concept of ourselves, we believe our worth is being attacked. What we believe is that we are being pulled down. We are now not being treated as equals. We are now being treated as a subservient or something like that. And we respond very angrily to any attack upon our personal value. Does that make sense? That's
yes.
Why. Yeah. So the main reason, my feelings for you are, you're worth the same as me. It doesn't matter what your condition is. From God's perspective, you are worth the same as me. I'm worth the same as you, right? Now, that doesn't change the fact that you have certain facade-based addictions that I can recognise that you can't see, right? And if you ask about them and I tell you about them, if I decide to, that doesn't change the fact that I still believe you're worth the same as me. You follow? I don't feel you're worth any less. Even though you can't see some things that I can see, I know that you will be able to see those things if you take the same path I've taken. So I know that in the end you have the ability to see the same things I see, right? So your worth to me is identical to my worth, right? But the problem is when I speak some truth with you, you don't believe that anymore because you've got an association between the worth and your current concept of yourself. And that has to change. That has to change. Without that changing, it is highly unlikely you are going to get through this phase of accepting your facade. Highly unlikely. Yeah. Because whenever your worth is triggered in the negative, you want to respond in this state, in rage and anger and so forth. Or just what I would call dismissal. A lot have chosen dismissal, cynicism and doubt and dismissal. That's another way of handling it, right? But either way, you will not get through this phase. This phase has to be done. You have to get to a stage of accepting your facade without judgment. And what you're doing whenever I say, this is what you do to one of you, what you're doing internally is saying, you're judging yourself for having that thing now.
Yes.
No, I don't judge you for having it. Like, honestly, you saw yesterday, I understand, and if we had some proper discussions about what we talked about yesterday, you'd see that I understand very thoroughly how all of your facade got created, far more than you can conceive at this point in time, right? Because I've seen centuries of it being created and how harsh it is towards the child, how harsh our environment on earth is towards the child. So I have complete compassion for everybody who's living in their facade. However, that doesn't change the fact that unless you get out of it, you will not have an awakening to sin. Right? And what I'm trying to do is assist you to have that awakening to sin. Right? To assist you to make these changes that need to be made. And while you associate your worth with hearing what you believe you should hear about yourself, and you are going to reject God's truth, and while you reject God's truth, you can never progress. And the danger is, while you continue to strongly, attach your worth to this other thing, truth, and while you attach the two together, what's going to happen is you're going to reject truth most of the time. Most of the time. And eventually, the rejection of truth is going to get so intense inside of you emotionally that you'll just want to get angry about it. And of course, the person you're probably going to get angry with is me, because I'm the one sharing it with you. But if it's not me and it happens to be your partner or your friend or your, neighbour down the road, then you'll get angry with them too. Right? And what I'm suggesting is we've got to disconnect ourselves. Hearing truth is far more important than sort of trying to measure your own worth while you're doing it. Right? Remember, and this is what I keep saying to you, remember that God values you. God values you equally. There's no person here who is more important than any other person here. None. And that applies in the spirit world. When you go to the spirit world, you'll see that there's people who have immense power. Right? There's people who have hundreds of homes of their own. There's people who are basically leaders of cities, not just one city, but 10, 20 cities in the spirit world. And from God's perspective, they have the same worth as you. Right? Now, once you really get that and start disassociating, pulling apart this joining that you've currently got together of worth and truth, you're basically saying, if I hear the truth, then it means I'm worth less. So hearing the truth equals to us worth less. Right? And it's got to change, because if it doesn't change, you're not going to get through this phase, which is this, recognising my unloving self. You're not going to accept it. You're going to judge it, condemn it, and not only are you going to judge it, condemn it, you're going to judge and condemn every single person who exposes it. Doesn't matter who, you're going to judge and condemn every person who exposes it. And it doesn't matter what you feel about me, doesn't matter what you feel about other people, doesn't matter how loving you think you are. Unless you do this accepting of your facade, you are going to get angry and you are going to degrade your condition. It's a choice. Does that make sense? And all I'm doing is warning you about the choice.
It seems weird that, when we're confronted with truth and our worth is triggered, yet to come about that state, our worth was denigrated back down there.
Exactly. What happened in your childhood, and this is the problem, this is why we do it. What happened in our childhood was whenever anybody told us the truth, most of the time their motivation was to pull us down. Most of the time their motivation was to harm us. Right? They weren't interested in helping you. Most of the time they were interested in hurting you. Right? And that's why you now believe that anybody who tells you the truth is only interested in hurting you. Right? But it is an old belief. It's a belief of the hurt child that needs to be understood. But if you can at least understood it, no matter whenever you feel hurt from what anybody says, the key is to go back into yourself and go, okay, I feel hurt from what's being said here. It might be truth or it might not be truth. I don't know at this point, but I feel hurt. Right? Rather than acting upon my hurt and turning into rage and other emotions, I am far better off to release my hurt and then analyse what's being said. Yeah. And that's a part of accepting my facade, accepting how I really am. Right? So I get lots of comments made about me, how useless I am about this and how bad I am about that. And, why hasn't he done this yet? Why has he done that yet? And all that kind of stuff. Honestly, if I didn't accept my facade, I'd have thousands of people to be angry with. But each one that I'm angry with would be degrading my condition. Every time I plan their destruction, it would be even worse, wouldn't it? Yeah. But go to Ben and then reasons why I've raised that with you. Because I see many people continuing just to walk away from divine truth as soon as they hit this point. And it only has to be one thing, just one pet thing, one thing that really hurts inside sort of thing. And that's it. Done. They're gone. And frequently the people that are left over are the ones who are not yet sensitized themselves enough to this place. And then when they get to that place, off they go too. And then another group of people come along and when they get to that place, off they go too. And so what we finish up with is a never-ending cycle of people who come along listening to divine truth until they get to this place, and then they're gone. And what I'm suggesting is you don't have to do that. You can get over that. You can get through that place. You know? Yep. And people offering you truth with love, because it always needs to be with love. If people are just offering you truth to attack you, denigrate you, pull you down, well, you know, I feel I wouldn't listen to it, and I don't think you should either. But when people offer you the truth with love because they're motivated by a desire to see you have a relationship with God and see you, you know, develop the happiness that comes along from that, then if I was you, what I would do is I'd look at the motivations of the individual. Rather than just running off in anger because something they said has hurt you, I would look at their underlying motivations. Are they pure? Are they more pure motivations than you've ever had at this point? And if they are, then why not listen to them? Why are we so resistive? We're resistive because we think this still. Because we think whenever we hear something true about ourselves, we think we're now worth nothing. And that's not true. You are, no matter how damaged you are the pinnacle of God's creation. No matter how damaged you are. You are the crowning glory of his creation. The most highest laws in the universe have been created for your soul. You are a unique and special individual from God's perspective. You are equal to every one of every other of God's children, no matter what their current position in the spirit world or on earth. You have the same value to God as every one of those people. Every single one. So it's time that when we hear something about ourselves, we remind ourselves about those truths, rather than just going off on a big tangent in a spurt of addiction not getting met, you know, the rage and anger that comes from our addiction not getting met. And if you do that, you will not be part of this cycle of people who just hear divine truth for a period of time. Oftentimes it's 3, 4, 5 years. They like it until they get challenged personally. Bang, that's it. And you won't be part of that cycle. You'll continue your progress. You follow? But if you react badly to the facade being exposed, it may be many, many years. And in some of my friends in the first century case, it's been 2 millennia. And they still haven't responded after that. Yeah. When I married Mary in the first century, there was an uproar in amongst most of the disciples, most of the people who were listening. They were traumatized by the fact that their person who was their master, as they called me at the time, would marry a prostitute. And then when I let her sit in on my meetings with every person, including every male, can you imagine? Most left at that time. Most left. And many of those men who left, and many were women too, by the way, because they felt jealous and so forth, but many of those men and women who left are still in the hells today, still condemning my actions of marrying my soulmate. Interesting, huh? Just that one thing I did. I didn't even say anything to them about it. And that was it. Right? And you're going to be tempted to do the same thing. You're going to be tempted at times. Robert, thanks.
AJ, as a group who are hopefully going to develop some aspirations in the right direction,
yep.
Is there anything we can do to help each other? Because we're probably interacting more with each other than, you know what I mean? Is there one thing that we can really...
Well, I think two things. two things, and it always well, no, I think it really gets down to the four things, doesn't it? The four tools, like
just individually developing.
Remind each other to have faith in God's goodness. Remind each other to have faith in God's goodness. When you're going through traumatic events, remind each other God's good. We need to remember God's good, even though bad things are happening here. A lot of that could be spirit attack and other things, or the result of our own past behaviour. In fact, the law of compensation is still at work. So what we sowed years ago, it's going to catch up with us now. We can't expect that it won't, right? It's going to catch up with us. My friend Luther that I raised with you just earlier, he's still bearing the consequence of him introducing a teaching in the 17th century. Or 16th century, I forget which century now, but hundreds and hundreds of years, he's still bearing the consequence of the fact that he released that he actually did that, right? So what he sowed hasn't gone away, but he's dealt with it differently. He's faced his own facade, he's faced his own truth, he's worked through his stuff, he now has a relationship with God, right? So, but he still has to bear the consequence that he led a movement which resulted in hundreds of thousands of people, historically millions of people, historically practicing things that are out of harmony with God's truth. So that's the first thing. Have faith in God's goodness. Second thing, love truth. Share the truth with each other. Be honest with each other. Do it with love. Stop attacking each other. Be honest with each other. Stop waiting until you're so angry before you say something to somebody. Be brave and say the things that need to be said to your partner, to your children, to each other when you're in your discussion. Say the things that need to be said, but be honest about it and humble about it, recognising that you yourself have things that you've got to work through too, and recognising that, no, you can see this problem in another, but you realise that they probably can see problems in you too. Do that. And then my suggestion is take action. Encourage each other to take action. Stop encouraging each other to go, oh yeah, no, I agree with you. That is frightening, isn't it? And saying, yeah, I agree with you about that. As if you're saying to them, well, no, I think you're right. You shouldn't do anything, right? So stop doing that. And when they get into these rages and they're upset, where they're facing the facade and they're angry, just say, look, this is what he warned us about. We're getting angry because we have facades being confronted. That's what we need to address that. We need to feel about that. Instead of going, yeah, no, sometimes I think he's a bastard too, and which I often hear back people say, literally that. And let yourself work through what's being had. A lot of you think I plan your harm, like you two girls who thought you were locked out of the venue today because you arrived on time because you believe in my badness. I'm not going to lock the room just to prevent you from getting in. If you're on time in particular, I'm definitely not going to do it. And all that had happened was that one side was locked and the other side wasn't, and they didn't realise, right? And so they felt locked out for the time. But believe in people's goodness instead of their badness. Believe that. But I'm not trying to make your life more difficult. I'm trying to assist you to grow and change. Take action about that. And then the fourth thing, just encourage each other to feel emotion without telling stories. Now, in this group so far, you guys have been good with this. I've noticed many of you, as we've been talking, you've been connecting emotionally and letting yourself feel what you feel. This is good. And you notice you didn't have to tell anybody anything. You just felt it, didn't you? Right? That's good. That's a good thing. That's what you want to do. So tell each other the truth about your lives, but don't tell the story just so that you can get commiseration or approval from others. Do it so you can connect to your feelings, And if you're struggling to connect to your feelings and you think you need the help to tell somebody your story so that you can connect, then go and do that. In the Robert James Lee's book, there's another example where there's a lady who, Marie, her name is, who's helping another lady who was, it was in this section called Harvest of Jealousy. I think it's in the first book. And she's there she was encouraged to tell her story to a new person, not the same person over and over again, but to a new person who might benefit from hearing the story. And so Afra was a new person, so she was encouraged to tell him the story, and she had a great big fit, remember? And I talked to you about fits just earlier, and I've had plenty of them, and you're going to have some of them because there's emotions involved with all of those. She passed out, remember? On the ground. They waited for her to come around, and they picked her up and let her feel what she needed to feel as a result of telling that story. And that's the way you help each other, not by getting together and going, oh, no, yeah, your story's pretty bad, my story's bad, who's the worst story? Let's do that, and almost use it as an entertainment rather than actually connecting emotionally. So they're the things I would do.
Yeah, thank
Rob.
you.
Yeah. It always gets back. These are the 4 tools at your disposal. And in the end, it always gets back to developing an aspiration to engage those tools. Always.
Thanks.
Yeah. Good. If we go to Joanne, this will have to be last one because I'm way over time. So.
In the process of facing our facade, is it useful to look at things that you really don't like in other people?
Very useful.
And because what I've been finding in the last few days is that I'll see something I really don't like, and when I think about it, I do that myself.
Yeah, we often see things in other people we really don't like, and the reason why we feel so angry about it is because we're in a lot of judgment about it, and the main reason why we're in judgment about it is because we don't like those things about ourselves either.
Exactly.
Yeah. Very helpful. There's a lot of things that are really helpful. Anything that makes you angry, and I've said this to you before, anger is your guide, right? Anything that makes you angry, there's a problem because it's exposing the fact that there must be a problem in this regard with an addiction not getting met. There's a problem, so start looking at it. Be honest with yourself about these things. I've had to be really honest with myself. Not having another person around who can tell you something about yourself accurately means that you've got to get really honest with yourself if you want to progress towards God. You've got to be really honest. And it requires self-analysis, self-awareness. And the more you develop it, the more honest you become, the more open you become to God telling you new things as well. It's just wonderful. So what I'm getting at with this discussion is that accepting your facade is, without a doubt, the area of danger. Right? It's without a doubt the highest area of danger in your progression, because it's the area where you've yet to have any real faith, because you've yet to process through pain and suffering and feel the benefits, while at the same time getting highly influenced by spirits and other people around you to not go there because they pressurising you to not do it. Because why? Because they created it. They're not going to want you to expose what's being created. So they're pressuring you to not do it. And then at the same time, you've got the internal pressures, your own resistance to pain and your own resistance to terror, internally pressurising you to not accept your facade. Can you see that it's a place of it's where all the pressures come together with there being no seeming positive benefit outwards. And that's why it's the period of time where most people just spit the dummy and off they go. All right? And if you can get through it, your life will be changed, forever. Forever. But what I notice is that not many people get through it. Not many people. Very, very few, in fact. On earth, very few get through it. We want to change that. We want to change that. So a group of people like yourselves get through it, the next group we have gets through it, and you imagine a few hundred people getting through that phase where they are starting to feel their terror and getting over their terror. They're not validating their fear anymore. They're not feeding their fears anymore. They start to feel their pain. You imagine the momentum of that, where you've got, and then each of you, once you've done that, you now have the ability to show someone else how to do it. Because you've done it. You can't show somebody how to do something that you haven't done. And once you do it, you have done it, and you know you've done it, and you know you can help other people do it. And imagine if we had 300 people helping other people do it. Can you see how the potential for growth is then? But without getting through this phase, you know what's going to happen? We're going to have a never-ending cycle of people who hear divine truth, listen to it for a period from anywhere from 1 to 5 years, and then spit the dummy and off they go and forget about it. And in most cases, badmouth it while they go. And then the next group of people will come along, ignoring the bad-mouthing of the previous, and they'll listen to it for a while, try to put it into practice. They get to this stage, accepting their facade. No, they don't want to do that. Spit the dummy, off they go. Half of them bad-mouth it again. And then there's a number of people who are going to have to ignore all the bad mouth, all of the anger and all of the rage, and they're going to come along and then they'll hear about it and do it and then get to this stage, and what they're going to do. You can see that if we're not careful here, we just have a never-ending cycle of people just hearing divine truth until they get to the point where they don't want to hear anything about themselves. Now, I grew up in a religion that proclaimed itself to be God's truth on earth. And I suppose most religions do, don't they? Otherwise, they wouldn't have adherents. You know what I've found? Is that hardly anybody in that religion is able to hear any truth about themselves. And I find that that applies to almost every religion on the planet. They're okay hearing some external, what they believe is external truth. But when it comes to anything facing internal truth, that's it. Everybody shuts down. That's our problem. That's why we can't hear God. We want to be able to hear God, because without hearing God, you're not going to get a connection with God. You're not going to be able to be educated in God's love. You're not going to be able to be educated in love at all. We need to get through this barrier, you see. Does that sound good? Yeah. So I'm saying these things to you not to, make you feel down about the whole process, but rather to realise that this is the area of risk. This is where your future, when it comes to connection with God's truth and connection with God, is at risk. You either will do this and off you go, or you will do this. You will not do it. It's impossible to do anything else but one of those two things. Decision point. Jumping off the cliff point. Whatever you want to call it. It's a place where most people come to grief. Yep. And like I say, many not only come to grief in the fact that they don't face their facade and accept it, but they also now act on their facade and cause huge amounts of further damage to God's truth on earth, as well as damage to themselves. And what do you think about the laws that govern God's universe surrounding God's truth? Do you think attacking God's truth is worse or better than attacking any lie? Attacking anything at all is not good, is it? But attacking God's truth is going to have more laws that you break than anything else that you can consider doing. So it's not going to end up good if you want to do that. And this is what I'm saying to you. Nina, you would like to ask is, I've blown my time today. So it's a quick question.
We will have to face this crucial point more than once, won't we? It'll be a thing we'll need to be able to repeat.
Well, you will continue to face it until you get through this terror. Once you get through the terror, remember the goal of the facade. So this is probably what I need to remind you of. The two goals of the facade were, one, to have desensitised myself to pain. Number one. Number two was to avoid terror, fear at all costs. Now, unless you get through those two emotions, there are only two emotions. One's terror and one's the desire to reject pain instead of accept it. Unless you get through those two emotions, you will always be at risk, because you will have yet got through accepting your facade. Do you follow me? But the very first stage is really, so when we talk about the acceptance of the facade, This part's the deconstruction of the facade. Until you've deconstructed it, you're in danger, right? But what I'm saying is most people don't even get to the point of deconstructing their facade. They don't even get there. They don't even get even close to their fear or their false beliefs or their pain. They only get to the point where they want an addiction met, it doesn't get met, and they're angry. So they don't even accept their facade, let alone want to deconstruct it. Right? And that's why I'm saying it's the point. Once you accept your facade, there's a high likelihood that you will proceed to want to deconstruct it. Because once you accept it without judgment, you realise all the negative things that it does to you, all the negative things it does to others, the damage it does, the sin extra sin it creates. You realise how sleazy it is, like how it is sleazy. It's like it's a sleaze-based bartering system. Emotionally, that's what it is. And you just feel terrible with it, so you want to deconstruct it. Does that make sense? But if you don't accept it, you won't even feel that. And so you won't deconstruct it. Yeah. So I feel that once, until you've deconstructed your facade, you will have danger. But the real danger is before then. Is even just getting to the point of accepting it. Because most people who accept they have a facade always get to the point of wanting to deconstruct it. Most people. So it's almost like a flip side. You know how I said 99% of people who hear divine truth get to this point and split, right? Well, almost 100% of people who get to that point and accept get to the next point.
That's encouraging.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can see why. Once you've accepted it and you feel the sin of it, you've had an awakening to sin now. Once you've had an awakening to sin now, you want to remove sin. You do. Once you've had the awakening, of course you're going to want to remove sin because you see all the painful effects of sin. So of course you want to remove it. Follow? So the real difficult period is this period of accepting this unloving self, accepting the facade, accepting what it generates, accepting the pain it creates, everything, without judgment. That's the real tricky part. That's the part where our worth, remember the worth, truth, equality, gets cut. We no longer see our hearing truth as a measure of our worth anymore. Right? In fact, we start seeing hearing truth is a measure that God feels we're worth enough to hear a truth, which is fantastic. So we've cut that. This is where we break that connection.
Yeah, I find the worst truth equation really, really helpful, actually.
Yeah. So the key is, accept the facade. Once you accept it, and it's an emotional process, it's not an intellectual thing. You can't just go, I've accepted it. You're going to go through some pretty hard emotions to accept it, to be frank. But once you accept it, you will have confronted many of your addictions. You'll have confronted many of your belief systems already. You'll have already worked, disconnected between worth and hearing truth, and that is going. And you're going to feel. You'll have the awakening to sin. You're going to feel the detrimental effects of sin, and then as a result of that, you will go, I really want to get rid of this sin now. I really want to do what I can, use God's laws that I know to help me get rid of this sin, to become perfect. Yeah. Makes sense?
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. That's good, guys. Yeah. I felt that I wanted to have that chat with you because I just see, like, for most people, divine truth is just a revolving door. You know what I mean by that? They go in, spend a few months to a year to 5 years, some of them. Some of them mean longer than 5 years. And then back out. And another group comes in, back out. Another group comes in, back out. And nobody seems to want to get, or very few get beyond. There's a few, but there's very few that get beyond this point of accepting their facade enough to the point where they really want to deconstruct it. And It's such a waste of time. You would have been better off not even hearing of it, probably. Right? Because you just wasted 5 years of life and nothing happened. And on top of that, you have a lot of regrets that you did it in the first place. It's pointless, you know. And because we're stuck in this area a lot of the times, we don't get to experience the joys that come from actually living God's truth. So we don't experience the joy of living the way. It's just a trauma. And after 4 or 5 years of trauma, most people go, oh, it's all too much now, I'm sick of this. I had one lady recently email me. She emailed to apologise afterwards, but there was quite a lot of... But she emailed me recently saying, you're a lousy teacher and I don't understand I don't know what's going on, and, you know, it's all crap anyway and I'm never going to listen again. And she had signed it off ex-listener and that's it. About a week later, she emailed saying, well, I think I was a bit angry. Yeah. There you were. But there's going to be times in this place here, you know, that's where what's going to feel like at times. And the key is to hold on to those 4 tools that you have. Remember, God is good. Remember, God values you. Remember, no matter how bad you feel analysing your facade, God still sees you as having worth. Right? And remember, feelings are just feelings. They just need to be felt. They don't have to be acted on. They just need to be felt. And once you're humble to those feelings, things will change. And you've got to believe they'll change. You've got to have faith that they'll change before they'll change. But it's part of the process. Everybody has to go through it. I've had to go through it this life. Every single one of the 14 who have returned are going to have to go through the process. You're going to have to go through the process. There's nobody in history that hasn't. And the only time you won't have to, the only time somebody won't have to on earth, is once sin is removed from earth.